So we can solve that with two properties. One is a little bit of padding. So padding, here, like as soon as you start putting down values in CSS, you have to kind of have some system in mind. So one way to generate that is called a modular scale. Just go to modularscale.com. The EM versus PX thing is like a big question. I'm not really on the EM bandwagon or REM. So I would just type in like 18 pixels here and then pick a ratio. Perfect fifth is a good one. That's what the default is. It's actually definitely related to music, which is fun. All right, that's to minor third or something. All right, so what does this thing do? It basically takes 18 pixels, multiplies it by 1.2, and that becomes 21.6. And then it multiplies that number by 1.2, and then multiplies that number by 1.2, and you get these like measurements that are all related to each other. So if we were to grab this, this is stupid. Just give me variables for these things. You definitely basically just start with the pixel values. This is one way to kind of get like almost a subconscious like relationship between all of your measurements and sizes, because you do get these large sizes, 160, and maybe that's the right size for like a photo, right? And then you get smaller sizes, and then for some of the larger ones, maybe we'll make our H1 this size, and then our H2 this size, H3 this size, H4 this size, and then our body will be 18 pixels. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
So this is a modular scale is like a trick you can use to like generate those measurements, or you can steal them. Right? So you can just be like, okay, what is the size of this article layout that I really like? You go into computed, and it says 22 pixels and no text. It's some kind of font that they're using, and then a line height of 30.8. So outside of these measurements that you just get in computed, you also have an unstated measurement, which is the width of the element. So 716 in this case is something we're going to need. So let's go into our code pen. And what we're going to do is, I'm just going to leave it at like the 18 pixels. So you could make a variable. You know, if you're working later on in your career, you'll have variables for all these things. But we're just going to copy paste the pixel value a bunch, so it's okay. I don't want to confuse everyone with less in the preprocessors and stuff. Okay, so this gives us, this solves the mobile problem, does not solve the desktop problem. So to solve the too big problem, we basically want to have a max width on this, and we just stole the value from the Aeon website. Okay, so 716, and then with border box, this padding goes on the inside. We can probably do, this preprocessor lets me do some math on the fly. But we basically want to add 18 to the sides on each side. Okay, this gives us a container for article, and then margin left auto, margin right auto. Keeps the article in the center when we get to a screen size that's larger than the article. Right? And then because it's max width, if it was width, there would be a problem on mobile. You can scroll, it's like not good. So you want max width so that if it's below that, it uses the default for display block, which is width more or less auto. So this is here. We're just not stating it. Right? That's the default. Cool. Everybody good so far?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just quickly, sorry. Mm-hmm. You've split up margin left and margin right both to have auto. What's the difference between doing like margin 0 auto?
Yeah, I'm not setting anything for margin top. Yeah, it's identical. This is the same as doing margin 60 pxi.
Yeah, is it a convention thing? Is it a preference thing? I don't know whether instead of doing it on one line, it's better to break it up into individual top, bottom, left, and right.
It's more that if I later want to add and remove those styles, I don't have to think about the unpackaging. I mean, yeah. So I didn't want to. I guess it's definitely fine either way. For margin, it's one of those that's easy to unpack. I think for backgrounds, I tend to, that's where I tend to use this to kind of an extreme, because there's so many background hyphen whatever, there's background size, background visibility, background like clip, background, a bunch of them. So it's just easier to unpack and make sure that you're not. Basically, if you were to do margin top 60 pixels, and then margin top, if I were to do 0 auto, right? It overrides margin top. But so basically, just make sure you understand that these shorthand notations actually set all of the. They override any of the specifics set earlier, right? So even though it's not explicit here, margin bottom 60 pixels, it's actually not here because this implicitly sets margin bottom to 0. Cool.
Sure. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. So it's just it's really no difference. Margin. We can do this. What's another size that we can grab? 31, and you can round them down. It's fine. They don't have to be perfect. It's at this point it kind of becomes like a Bob Ross episode. It's really up to you how you make your pages look and what pages you steal, and it's your world. All right. So we're gonna copy this Aeon website. So the first thing you want to take is the body font. So how does a paragraph look? And you actually just want to have that as your default look on the body tag. So in particular, we've got I guess this one's a little. I don't want to say a bad example, but it's like, line height here's 30.8. We're gonna probably ignore that value slightly and do 31. So normally I would put 31 pixels here, right? If this is like not terrible, and then our default font size was 22, I think. Yeah, maybe it's 22 font size. 22 pixels. This works well for our body text. I'm not super happy with the font, but it has that same kind of aggressively readable size that Aeon does. So it's like bigger than like a tiny official site or some kind of app. It's really meant for long form reading. But this line height 31 pixels doesn't really work because as soon as we get to a larger font size or some other element that has a larger font size, the line height of 31 pixels is too small for those elements, right? So it doesn't really scale. The line height actually is a pretty special attribute where you can do, so you could do here like 1.2 EM or 1.5, whatever 22. Remember your pre-algebra. 1.4 on that. So there's two options for line height. You can actually make it an EM value, which would base it off of the font size. And then you can make it a scalar, like a value with no unit. And the latter is preferable. So the reason you want to make it a unitless number is because rather than inheriting the actual measurement, so EM would convert this to 1.4 times 22. So we convert it to 31 pixels on the body, and that would get inherited. So 31 pixels basically gets inherited. So it's 1.4 EM in this context is like a very specific number. And then if you do it as a scale, then as your font size increases, the other elements also get that a multiple of that font size as their line height. So it's very important to keep line height on the body, just your regular line height, as a scalar value. Cool.
Yep.
All right, how much time? Oh, we might definitely go over a little bit. Sorry. We talked about border box. I guess I didn't really cover what it does. If you go back to basically, it determines whether the padding is considered as part of the whole width calculation. So let's say if we had if we just back and we had width 100% on the article, and we have 18 pixels of padding everywhere, right? So it's working great right now. There's no scrolling. Well, there's let me just fix that. Okay, so images. One good thing that I tend to put on images is max width 100%. It's a good default for images. That way they don't pop out of the article. So once you have this, we can really see that there's no horizontal scrolling with 100% and some padding. But if we were in the classic style CSS, not border box, there would be horizontal scrolling of 18 pixels on both sides. Because what it's saying is that width is the width of the content, not the width of the border box. So so if we look at the box model, we've got we've got the content, it would set this to be 100%. So it's like 100% of the parent. All right, our content is 100% of the parent, right? And then with the box sizing border box, what it's saying is the outside of the border, that's 100%. When you're setting width, you're setting the width of the border box, not of the content box. So if it's box sizing border box, there's no horizontal scrolling because it sets the border box, it sets it to 100% and then calculates the size of the inner content such that it fits, so there's like X amount of padding, etc. So it calculates the size of the border box or padding box, whichever. There's no border here, but so border and padding sizes can change without screwing up your layout. Especially important when you have percentage widths and stuff, because like calculating a percentage and then subtracting out the padding is just like really annoying. Because the padding might be a static value and your percentage is a kind of dynamic value. Okay, next up we're going to talk about we did next width. That's 20 pixels. So we've got our line height set and our font size set. To pick a font, right? I think that's the next thing. Do all this, good typography. All right, so as I was saying, you could set your paragraph sizings on P tag, but you should do it on the body just because there are other tags that you might not think of, such as UL items that are not in paragraphs. So if we had only done this stuff on our paragraphs, our lists and some of the other elements wouldn't get the sort of style guide treatment. So what makes a good set of typography? My recommendation is to steal the measurements, and then the sizes that you want are 15, probably to 25. I should change this to be 25. It can definitely be a lot higher than 18. It depends on the font. And then the max width of the container needs to allow for about 40 to 70 characters to align. So if you have a bigger font, your container can be bigger. If you have a small font, so if we were to go down to like kind of compact 16 pixels, this is probably getting to be too wide of a container. Mm-hmm. So we would want to reduce the container size. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So all of those things are interdependent. And similarly, if you have the more characters you have to align, the taller the line height needs to be. So with this font, actually, I would probably go much taller to like 1.7. Like 1.4, this is a little too compact for my taste. But I think we're going to fix this just by changing the font. This font, I don't think is Google fonts. So I'm going to just grab some kind of other serif font. So how do you pick fonts? Big text is usually in a sans serif font, but it's also the place where you can experiment the most. So if you want to have a non-standard, not in the top 20 kind of font, I would only use it at the title size. Don't use it as in your body copy or anything like that. For the body copy, you can use serif or sans serif. And then the easiest thing is just to use one font family, and then for titles and stuff, go with the bold size. So these first three, Open Sans, Roboto, and Lotto, are the most common and the easiest to use. So we can just grab one of these three and like use it right away for both our body copy and our titles. Does it have X height? No, it looks like Google Fonts doesn't let you search by X height, but there's a measurement of how large the small letters are in comparison to the larger letters. And let me find a counterexample. Yeah, this is kind of it's like too thin. Yeah, Dosis is an example of a font that has a pretty small line height, sorry, pretty small X height. So the big letters are a whole 2x bigger, and this type of font is bad for body copy. So what you want is a tall X height for body copy, and a lot of the Google fonts, especially at the top, are pretty solid for that stuff. And then also for body copy, you want something that's just not very interesting, because you don't want to be surprised by any of the letters. You're going to see them hundreds and hundreds of times. So definitely nothing decorative like this. So you don't want anything interesting in your body copy. So almost all of the interesting fonts, or like something that's not standard, that you could consider using it on a title, but you should definitely not even consider using it on body copy. Okay, so Roboto. I'm trying to look for one that looks kind of like this. So that C is pronounced achieved. Let's look for achieved. Achieved, and then here we're going to say we want a serif font. And display is the large size. So let's kind of look at Volco.
X height is just simply the height of a lowercase x, right? So.
Yeah, it's the height of the lowercase. Yeah, Josephine is a great example of a low X height. So this is not good for body copy. Garamond. Garamond looks great. Leticia. If it says text, so yeah, there's fonts that are specifically designed for body copy that are usually called text. And then there are some that are specifically for display, and sometimes they're called display. It's like something display. And display are basically, it's just like funky fonts for like large headers and stuff like that. They're rarely used for body copy. Although, I think the searching within Google Fonts, other than the popularity aspect, isn't that great. So we're just gonna pick something. Yeah, let's go with this one. Okay, so you probably want everything. Just you want normal, italic, bold, and italic, especially if you don't control the content, right? So if it's a blog theme that you're making for someone, it would be a disservice to, whenever they make a bold thing, it would go to a some other system font. So that's something that not getting the right fonts and not properly setting them in CSS is can be a problem. Okay, so we're going to put this font family right on our body. So this is the default for everything. And then what you want to do is probably set some kind of fallback. Only two system fallbacks. There's Georgia for serif fonts. Georgia is a nice looking font, very similar, kind of like that. And then for sans serif, there's Helvetica, right? Which is the one we were on before. And then at the end, you just put the very category of fonts, so like serif or sans serif. Okay. Let's just go through the different elements and how we can improve them once we have this kind of base setup done. So at this point, this is the paragraph. We're not going to change anything to it. So in effect, we're done with the paragraph styling. But some of the titles we can do some more too. The figures have a default padding in margin in normalize, and then the H1, H2 values are currently the default. So what we can do is use our scale to set some more interesting sizes to those elements. And don't be shy with it. Definitely try like 1 or 2 sizes beyond what you'd be comfortable with, and really reflect on whether it's too big or not too big. So here's what we're going to do. Font size. Just going to drop it in. Okay, it's huge. On titles like this, when you have like a really maybe only 10 words or like 5 words, you can definitely drop the line height all the way down to 1, maybe even like 0.95, depends on the font. So that's to get that kind of like giant headline feel. You want to go line height all the way down. This is too big. It might not be too big in all cases, but it's probably like 1 step too far. So we're going to go down 20% more. All right, this is interesting, and at the same time, it's not completely overwhelming. You know, it's really, again, just kind of Bob Ross at this point. You can do whatever you want. Okay, similarly for H2. We're going to grab either the next one down or 2 down. So let's try this one. And here, there's an argument to be made that really you should just be using EMs. The only thing that lets you do is change the font size at like a parent size, you know, like the body. So if we raise the body size here, it only changes the paragraphs, and then the H1s, H2s don't change. So if we ever wanted to kind of play around with the size of the whole web page, it would be easier if these were in EM values. And then you can actually specify if so 18 pixels here is considered 1 EM. We need to start with 22 because that's our font size. So we're using something in this range, 65. We could be using the EM values, and that lets you play around with the design a little more. And again, on headers, you want to drop the line height back to 1. Yeah, this allows us basically to try out different sizes and see like how the page would look at 18 pixels. Definitely not 1 pixel. It's probably too small for the font size. Right. Yeah, but in general, I'm a proponent of making one really good article layout using pixels. It's fine. Yeah, here, this particular font that we picked is a little harder to read than this because we found some like a pretty expensive font probably. So what I would do is just like be a little generous with the line height. So maybe I'm going to do 1.6. So yeah, line height almost always improves the reading experience when it's larger. There's definitely, I think, like by the time you get to 2, it's like a little extreme. But it helps the eye make the movement from this piece of the end of the line to the next line. If the text is all mashed close together, you lose track of this line. This white negative space is harder to follow. Whereas with an average line height, you can actually follow this line and go to the next one. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's the basics of it. Yeah, if you want to, for instance, make some kind of cool styling for the author, we can do that. I don't want to keep anybody too long. It's already gone a few minutes after. So I'll just take any kind of questions you guys have. And we can, I guess maybe something you guys expected me to cover, more like grids and stuff.
Yeah, so I guess my thing, because I saw that you were using pixels, and mine goes back to using EM and REM, and I guess what I'm confused on, don't understand, is the difference between EM and REM. So I think EM is taken from what the page default has as their their font size. So let's say if you go to like I guess Chrome and you go to any website, the default font size is size 16px. And then EM takes from there. But then what does REM do?
Okay, so let's just, there's like literally only one setting that, like this font size setting that nobody ever uses, basically.
Mm-hmm.
That would alter the look of an EM or REM page. So and even then, like as soon as you say HTML font size 16 pixels, you've basically invalidated that browser setting. Okay. And as much as it's like hailed as like an accessibility thing, I don't think anybody honestly relies on that. If you're hard of seeing, you're probably just going to zoom in. And zooming in is going to change all PX values also. So it's gonna scale all the values. It's gonna scale all of your media queries, etc. So if you zoom in far enough, you'll actually get the mobile media query. If you go to thinkful.com. Just zoom in. See, it goes into the mobile view at a certain size. Because the media query is something like 600 pixels or something like that, and the browser is this. To the browser, this is 600 pixels. So So when you zoom in, pixels get larger. So my recommendation is not to worry too much about EM and REM. The difference between EM and REM is quite subtle. But it's pretty big. So EM is in the current context. So for instance, if we just said article, font size, 1.2 EM, that means everything inside of the article should increase by that EM size, right? So you saw our title increase, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our title is here, H1, inside of the article. And it's specified in EMs. Let's do font size 22 pixels. Okay, so putting this would be the same if we did like 26 pixels. We would also alter everything inside of it, right? That's because the H2s and H1s are paragraph doesn't have anything, so it's like inherits the font size, right? H1 and H2 are scaling the current context. So if we have that bumped up context, but we use REM for headers, it will that's EM, REM. The REM is a multiple, also a scalar multiple, but instead of multiplying the current context, it looks at the HTML element. So if our HTML element was 16 pixels, remember we're overwriting it in the article, right? So our article, I guess we have bodies also. So if our HTML was 16 pixels, this is what like 2.98 REM and 16 pixels is, you just do 2.98 times 16. That's the value, 47.68. So if you're always coding in 16 pixels on your HTML and you don't let the user change that value and you don't modify it in media queries, it's equivalent to using pixels. REM is. EM is always context-based, and it's. Let me give you guys a good example of where you use EM. So, is that making sense so far? REM is based on the HTML body font size, and if you never change this value, there's almost no point to using REM. It's the same as using pixels. I've even seen somebody do 1 pixel here, and then they would do like 46 REM, or I'm like, wait, what? Because all they're doing is just saying like, okay, well, it's 46 pixels, but I want to type in REM. So there's, I wouldn't stress too much about like, oh, REM is always better. There's definitely use cases, like there's some experiences you can do where, let's say on like a small screen, your interface is a little compact, and then as you get to a larger screen, you just want to bump all the font sizes at once. That's what REM lets you do. Is if you have everything kind of set in REMs, you just hopefully bump the font size on HTML, and all the elements scale up.
Okay.
So large media queries, so for like large screens, you can bump the font size of the whole page if it's built using REMs. EMs are trickier because it's anytime the context changes, it's, like if you have a bunch of elements inside of each other that each have 1.2 EM set, it would be 120% of its parent, of its parent, of its parent, of its parent. and we kind of stack and exponentially larger font size.
Okay.
So
Disastrous.
right, yeah. In general, there's a book called SMACS, SMACSS, Scalable Modular Architecture. This thing kind of came out with categories of CSS rules. So there's the base, and that's like things that apply to every element, like images, display inline block, whatever. Layout is kind of like your grid, which we didn't really talk about, but you basically just put inline block elements, vertical align them up top, and give them percentage width. Right? And then when it's mobile, you stack them all on top of each other. So the display inline block only comes in when you're above a certain size. So that's like a layout. And then we've got a module, which is like a component. If you guys are going to be learning about React, so a module, you can think of it as a component. It's like like this title. And then state is like as I'm hovering on something, right? And then theme are like particular colors, schemes, fonts, etc. So this module one is interesting. If we think of our title here, what is it? It's author, span class author. So if we just make some border radius, so remember how padding doesn't work on display inline elements. So this is a span, which is inline by default. Let's give it a display inline block. So now it behaves as we want it to. We want less padding on top and bottom. Okay, so consider this to be our, like a module, like maybe this whole thing with the meta. So everything having to do with the post. Club, date, margin left, equals. Let's make the author name right. Okay, so suppose we wanted this module in a different place with a different size. So if we had a listing of articles, maybe we want the same information, same arrangement, just smaller or larger. What would help here is if all of these things were expressed in terms of EMs, right? So this might be 0.5 EM, 1 EM, and then this is 0.5 EM, and then this is 0.04 EM. Do the radius anyway. So if your component, so this is a meta component. Let me just show you what meta is. Background, color, orange. So this whole thing, including the blue, let's get some padding. Okay, so suppose we wanted to reuse this meta elsewhere and change the font size.
Yeah.
Or change the whole size of it. That's what EM sizing lets you do, right? So if you have all of the things inside of our component, so our meta component has whatever the current 18 pixels. Okay, 22. Okay. So it's really good for things like these small paddings, because what you can do is just change the font size on the whole component, and those like paddings change. With so let me show you padding. We have 8 pixels, 18 pixels, and right. So if I change the font size now, let's say I want to double the font size, the padding starts to get like too small for this, right?
Yeah.
Because it didn't change. The letter starts right here, and the letter starts with the same, same distance from the edge of the element. So EM, what's good about it is that once you kind of create an element, so this is great for buttons and different button sizes. You just have a button huge. We have let's say the meta that huge. Huge. An alternative. It's not meant to go on its own. It's one way to distinguish a this assignment. So then if we add this huge thing, but you can think of it as a it's really good for buttons, basically, because if you have the regular meta, it has those nice paddings, but it's smaller. And then if you want to make it huge, all of the like tangential measurements, like the paddings, etc., are related to this to the font size. So that's the benefit of VMs, is that you want it on something within a component, right? And then on the component, you would have a more explicit size. So either pixels or REMs. So pixels and REMs are great for the font size on a component. They're like more explicit. There's you're never gonna run into like head scratch moments with pixels usually. So I think it's just like a really good straightforward way to do things. Even if you look at some of the best looking websites like medium.com, just inspect, they have tons of pixel values in there. It's definitely not taboo. It's not like great to use everywhere, and there are times when you want EMs, for instance, paddings on buttons.
Okay.
Just so that all those things can scale up and down without you measuring all those new pixel values and coming up with new padding sizes and stuff. So that's pixels and REMs are related. REMs are like explicit. It's just that it's scaled to the HTML font size. So if you ever want to scale your whole page up and down, REMs are good for that. You could still do it with pixels sometimes, but it's harder. And then if you need like a component to scale up and down to different sizes, you want to use EMs within the component so that you just set one font size on the component to bring it up or down, to make it bigger or smaller. And then percentages are really good for column widths. And you guys should just, my advice for columns is I didn't get it until I just inspected a bunch of websites. You just go into a website, you see how they have like 3 things stacked next to each other. Just inspect it, see how the percentages work out. See what kind of trick they use to get rid of either the space between inline block elements or if they're using floats. One thing I didn't cover here, let me find, there's floats. So there is a, this one has floats. Yep. So what is a float? So you guys see how the picture is in the middle, right? And then you can make floats, and this is a thing that is used in print a lot. You can put an image to the side of something else. And the interesting part about floats is that even though it kind of flows into the elements that come after it, right? So this paragraph comes after it in the HTML. And if we inspect it, it looks like the paragraph is going on top of the float. Yeah, this is the picture. And then these are two elements after it. And then text gets laid out around the floats. So this is an effect you can't get any other way other than floats. So you need floats for that. As far as making grids out of floats, that was the most prominent way to do it for many, many years. 5 years or so, maybe. But it gets kind of hairy, especially because floats can affect the elements that come after it in very unpredictable, not unpredictable, but kludgy ways, right? So if this was display block, you would never have something like this happen. So yeah, just try to avoid floats for grids.
Okay.
Okay. Here, yep, line height and depth. I talked about that. Images are inline block by default. They also lack a max width 100%, so that's something I tend to start with. Floats suck. I mean, it's really, it looks great in print. You know my source. Yeah, we basically did this whole thing. If you guys have, I guess we can look at a couple of your designs, but you know, I hope that was helpful to start with. Start you guys thinking about design, thinking about typography and readability. Do we have anything else here? One more? Yeah, okay, sorry. Cool. I hope you guys. I didn't really follow the script that Dominique gave me. Hope you guys are having a good weekend.
Yeah, this was super helpful, Alex. Thanks.
Yeah, it was great.
Thank you, Alex.
Well, if you have questions, if you have especially portfolios, I do portfolio review every other Wednesday. You know, I guess you guys will have probably your own program for that when you're looking at portfolios.